He wasn't supposed to be home that night. The city lights were still buzzing outside when Daniel Carter's car pulled into the long driveway of his estate. His suitcase dangled from one hand, the echo of his footsteps heavy against the marble floor as he pushed open the door. For a moment it was silence, the kind of silence that makes your chest tighten, that makes your ears strain for a sound, any sound. But then Daniel froze. His eyes widened. In front of him was a scene so unexpected, so gut-wrenching, that for a brief second his mind refused to accept it. This was his home, his sanctuary. And yet, in the glow of the chandelier, he realized he didn't recognize it anymore. He had spent years building this life, every brick of the mansion, every cent in his bank account, every moment spent chasing the dream of success. He thought it was all worth it. But what he saw that night told him otherwise. Betrayal doesn't always come in loud explosions. It often comes in whispers, in stolen glances, in things that were never meant for your eyes. Daniel Carter was about to learn that even a man who seems to have everything can lose it all in a single instant. And here's the question that will haunt you as you listen to this story. What could be so devastating that even a man with millions, with the perfect marriage, with the kind of life others dream of, would fall to his knees and question everything? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Carter was the man people in his town pointed to and said, "He made it." In his late 40s, he was the picture of success, a self-made millionaire who rose from a modest childhood in Ohio to owning a thriving investment firm. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought his way to the top and had the scars to prove it. At his side was Emily, his wife of 12 years, 38 years old, elegant, charming, the kind of woman who could light up a room without saying a word. To friends, they were the couple everyone admired: wealth, beauty, influence, and what appeared to be a bond unshakable by time. Their home was more than a house. It was a statement. A sprawling mansion in the suburbs, marble floors that gleamed under the chandelier light, manicured gardens that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Every corner of that estate whispered luxury and success. And in the background, moving quietly and almost unseen, was Maria. 52 years old, she had been their housekeeper for nearly a decade. Soft-spoken, careful, always respectful, but with the kind of eyes that noticed things most people overlooked. To her, this house wasn't just where she worked. It was where she observed, where she learned the rhythms of the family in ways even Daniel sometimes missed. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Daniel believed he had it all: the respect of his peers, the admiration of his community, a wife who stood proudly beside him, and a lifestyle most could only dream about. But perfection is often the mask worn by something more fragile, something far less stable. And inside those grand walls, tiny cracks were beginning to show. They weren't obvious to guests who came for dinner parties, or even to Daniel himself, who was often buried in business trips and late-night calls. But Emily's smile was changing, ever so slightly, the kind of change you only notice if you're watching closely. Daniel had no reason to suspect anything. To him, life was steady, predictable, safe. Yet behind closed doors, things were shifting. Secrets were beginning to pile up, small at first, easy to dismiss, easy to explain. But secrets have a way of growing, of multiplying, until they can no longer be contained. And what Daniel didn't know was that the walls of his perfect home were already carrying the weight of truths too heavy to stay hidden forever. All it would take was one unexpected night for everything to collapse. It began with the smallest of things. Emily, once so predictable in her routines, started having late-night outings she couldn't fully explain. "Just catching up with an old friend," she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now glued to her side. Daniel noticed the hushed tones of her conversations, the quick way she'd end a call when he walked into the room. At first, he brushed it aside. After all, Emily had always been loyal, hadn't she? He convinced himself it was stress, maybe loneliness from all his business trips. But doubt, once planted, has a way of growing. Maria noticed too. She always did. She saw the lipstick stains on a glass in the sink that didn't match any shade Emily owned. She smelled a perfume, expensive, exotic, that clung faintly to the air in the master bedroom, one Emily had never worn. And she noticed jewelry that had been tucked away suddenly missing, without explanation. Maria kept these observations to herself, quietly folding laundry, polishing the silverware, and watching as the household rhythm faltered. She had no proof, only details, and details alone couldn't explain what was unraveling inside that mansion. Daniel, though, was determined to silence the voice in his head. He buried himself in work, in meetings, in numbers that never betrayed him. He told himself he was imagining things, that marriage was about trust, and Emily deserved the benefit of the doubt. But late at night, lying awake while Emily's side of the bed grew cold, those reassurances felt hollow. He remembered the way she used to reach for his hand in the dark, the way she used to laugh at his late-night stories. Those moments were fading, replaced by a silence that gnawed at him. Weeks passed, and the cracks widened. Emily grew more distant, her excuses more vague, her temper more fragile. Maria caught Daniel staring at his wife once with a look that mixed confusion and quiet heartbreak. He wanted answers, but asking would mean admitting his fears were real. And so he swallowed the questions, waiting, hoping the storm would pass on its own. But storms don't disappear, they break. And Daniel's was closer than he realized. By the 10th week, Daniel could no longer ignore the weight pressing on his chest. His instincts, sharpened from years in business, screamed that something was wrong. He noticed Emily slipping out late one Tuesday evening, dressed with a care that stung his pride. He told himself to let it go. But something inside him refused. He grabbed his keys, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt since he was a young man. He didn't know what he was chasing, or what he might find, but he couldn't stand still any longer. And then it happened. On one ordinary Tuesday, when the air outside was cool and the house too quiet, Daniel found himself standing where he was never meant to be. Fate had placed him in the wrong place, at exactly the right time. That Tuesday night carved itself into Daniel's memory like a scar. He followed her quietly, his car trailing far enough behind that his headlights never touched the back of hers. Every turn she made, every stoplight she waited at, Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. His mind raced with explanations, innocent, logical reasons why his wife would slip away into the night without a word. But as the minutes stretched, the excuses thinned, until all that was left was the ache of uncertainty. Emily finally pulled into a part of town Daniel rarely visited, quaint, hidden, nothing like the glittering world they usually inhabited. He parked a block away, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths as he watched her step out of the car with a nervous glance over her shoulder. She wasn't meeting a friend. He could feel it before he even saw the truth. Through the window of a quiet, dimly lit restaurant, Daniel saw Emily sit across from someone who wasn't just a stranger. It was a man, younger, polished, leaning in close with the kind of attention that left no room for doubt. Daniel's heart thudded painfully, his knuckles whitening as he clutched the edge of the steering wheel. Their laughter drifted faintly through the night air when the door opened for another guest. It wasn't business. It wasn't coincidence. It was intimacy, the kind Daniel thought belonged only to him. For a long time, he couldn't move. He told himself to leave, to pretend he hadn't seen, to protect himself from the weight of the truth. But his body betrayed him. Before he realized it, he was standing on the sidewalk, close enough to see the way her hand brushed against the man's arm, close enough to feel the sting of betrayal in every breath. When Emily's eyes flicked up and met his through the glass, her expression crumbled. The shock on her face was confirmation enough. The room inside went silent, but the storm inside Daniel had only just begun. He turned away, every step heavy, his mind screaming with questions he couldn't yet form. How long? Why him? Had their marriage ever been what he believed it to be? He climbed back into his car, his vision blurred, his body trembling in a way he hadn't felt since his youth. For the first time in his life, wealth meant nothing. Reputation, power, status, all of it faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the raw wound left by the woman he trusted most. At home that night, the mansion felt colder than ever. Maria found Daniel sitting in the dark, still in his suit, eyes fixed on nothing. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. There are moments when silence says more than words ever could. And Daniel's silence that night was deafening. But the story didn't end there. Because betrayal, once exposed, doesn't quietly disappear. It grows teeth, claws, and consequences no one can predict. And Daniel was about to learn that the truth he uncovered was only the beginning. Daniel's worst fears had already been confirmed, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of the truth that followed. The man sitting across from Emily that night, laughing softly, touching her hand with familiarity, wasn't just anyone. When Daniel finally caught a clear glimpse of his face under the restaurant's warm light, his stomach dropped. It was Michael Lawson, his closest business partner, his confidant, the man he had trusted for over a decade to help build the very empire Daniel now stood to lose. In that instant, the betrayal cut deeper than anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about Emily's infidelity anymore. This was about loyalty, about friendship, about years of shared victories and late-night strategizing side by side. Michael wasn't just a colleague. He was supposed to be family. But as Daniel stood frozen outside that glass window, the truth became unbearable. Emily's affair wasn't born of impulse or weakness. It was deliberate, calculated, a deception that wove itself through his marriage and his company at the same time. What Daniel uncovered was not only the shattering of his home, but the potential collapse of everything he had worked for his entire life. Back at the mansion, fragments of past moments started to stitch themselves together. The sudden shifts in Emily's spending habits, her unusual interest in meetings she once ignored, the missing jewelry Maria had quietly noticed, all of it painted a picture Daniel had refused to see. Emily and Michael were not only together, they were plotting. Slowly, methodically, they were setting him up, draining his fortune in ways subtle enough to avoid suspicion. And Daniel realized with horror that the cracks in his marriage were only the surface of something far more dangerous. His wealth, his reputation, his legacy, all of it was at stake. He sat alone in his study that night, staring at documents Michael had once reviewed with him, contracts signed in trust, financial moves made under the assumption of loyalty. Now, every signature looked like a betrayal, every handshake a lie. The weight of it pressed on his chest until he could hardly breathe. The woman he loved had stolen his heart, but the man he trusted most had stolen his life's work. And together, they had conspired to leave him with nothing. It wasn't just love she had stolen, it was his trust, his empire, his very legacy. But a question gnawed at Daniel's mind, refusing to let him rest. How far had they already gone? Were they only beginning? Or had the empire he built already been gutted from within? And more importantly, could he stop them before it was too late? The confrontation came sooner than Daniel expected. He couldn't hold the truth inside, not after seeing Emily's eyes widen with guilt in that restaurant. That night, when she walked back into the mansion, Daniel was waiting in the dim glow of the study. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the raw weight of betrayal, as he asked the questions that had been clawing at him for weeks. Emily's response was swift, sharp, and drenched in denial. She wept. She swore it wasn't what it looked like. She begged him to believe her. But each word felt like smoke, designed to cloud his vision, to make him doubt what he had already seen with his own eyes. Gaslighting is a cruel weapon, and Emily wielded it with precision. For a moment, Daniel almost faltered. Almost. The following day, Michael confronted him directly. In a quiet corner of the office they once shared, Michael leaned in with the kind of confidence only betrayal can give and whispered, "Careful what you expose." You could lose everything. It wasn't a threat shouted in anger. It was calm, deliberate, a reminder of just how entangled their lives and fortunes had become. If Daniel made the wrong move, the empire he built could collapse, and Michael knew it. The betrayal wasn't only personal, it was business. And business was a battlefield Daniel couldn't afford to lose. But Daniel wasn't the kind of man to surrender. Behind Emily's tears and Michael's intimidation, he saw the truth, and he began to fight back in silence. He started gathering evidence, recording conversations, pulling financial records late at night while the rest of the world slept. And he wasn't alone. Maria, the quiet observer, began to share the details she had tucked away. The missing jewelry, the unfamiliar perfume, the lipstick stains that never belonged to Emily. Piece by piece, Daniel was constructing a puzzle he wished he never had to see completed. Every discovery pulled him deeper into a nightmare. Each detail revealed that the betrayal was wider, deeper, more deliberate than he could have ever imagined. But even as he thought he was closing in on the truth, something lingered, something that didn't fit, something Emily had never explained. At 48 minutes into this unraveling story, Daniel uncovered the revelation that broke him in ways even betrayal could not. Emily wasn't just conspiring with Michael. She had been hiding another secret for years, one buried so deeply that its exposure would shatter everything Daniel thought he knew, not just about his marriage, but about his entire life. And that secret was darker than he ever imagined. The truth finally surfaced, and it struck Daniel harder than any financial loss ever could. Emily hadn't simply fallen out of love. She hadn't been swept away by a reckless affair. No, her marriage to Daniel had been a calculated move from the very beginning. Every smile, every tender gesture, every promise whispered in the dark was part of a plan, orchestrated with Michael long before Daniel ever realized. What he thought was love was strategy. What he believed was fate was manipulation. For Daniel, it was a revelation that shattered the very foundation of his life. Every anniversary dinner they shared, every kiss exchanged beneath candlelight, every whispered "I love you" in the quiet of their bedroom. Suddenly, all of it was poisoned with the truth. He wasn't her partner. He was her target. And Michael had been there all along, guiding her, supporting her, waiting for the day they could strip Daniel of everything he owned. The betrayal wasn't sudden, it was years in the making. Daniel realized that the life he thought he built with Emily was a lie constructed with precision, designed to blind him until it was too late. She hadn't just broken his trust in the present. She had stolen his past, too, rewriting every memory with the ink of deception. For the audience watching Daniel's unraveling, the gut punch was unbearable. To realize that a man who fought so hard for his success had been living inside a story written by those who sought to destroy him. And yet, as devastating as it was, the twist raised one final, haunting question. If Emily's love was never real, if her vows were never sincere, then what else had she been hiding all those years? Daniel Carter had been brought to his knees, but he refused to stay there. With every piece of evidence he had gathered, every recording, every document, every detail Maria had helped him uncover, he built a case that would not only end his marriage but dismantle the web of lies that had nearly stolen his legacy. The confrontation turned into action. Daniel filed for divorce, stripped Emily of the wealth and status she once paraded so proudly, and severed Michael from the very company they had built together. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Emily, once admired as the graceful wife of a millionaire, found herself shunned by the same society that once envied her. The glittering image she had crafted was gone, leaving only the shadow of betrayal. Michael, cornered by Daniel's relentless pursuit of justice, faced not just the loss of business but the weight of a criminal investigation. The empire they sought to steal crumbled beneath them, while Daniel, though scarred, stood tall again. For Daniel, rebuilding wasn't easy. The mansion felt emptier, the laughter of his past a constant reminder of what he had lost. But out of that emptiness came something unshakable, resilience. He poured his energy into his company, his friendships, and into rediscovering the man he was before betrayal tried to break him. The wounds were real, but they became the foundation of a strength he never knew he had. Because in the end, money can buy power, but it cannot buy loyalty. And sometimes, the ones we trust most are the ones who bring us to ruin. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think Daniel should have done that night? Would you have walked away or fought back? Tell us in the comments. And if this story struck you like it did us, hit like and subscribe for more stories that reveal just how fragile trust can be.